Hey everyone, Father Lane here. Welcome to another class in our course on the Gospel of John. And you can see today we are at the Idaho State Capitol for another visit to Jerusalem as we look at John chapters 11 and 12 as the third Passover in the Gospel of John is prepared. We have much about which to speak in this class, so let's jump right to our agenda. We're going to first do a little bit of review to see what we've seen in the prior 10 chapters of John's Gospel, all of which is prologue to these two chapters. Then we're going to look at the raising of Lazarus in chapter 11 and the responses to it, and then we will close with a few comments on John chapter 12. First, some review from our introductory video way back at the beginning of the semester. You can see all of these themes recur often in the Gospel of John, and most of them show up explicitly in John 11 and 12. We're going to learn especially how Lazarus goes from literal death to literal life. But we're going to see what's at issue principally is faith. Again, remember why the Gospel is written, so that you may come to believe. And then we're going to see how this is cast as a manifestation of the Lord's glory, and the Lord, of course, manifests the Father's own glory. We saw that back in the prologue. Moreover, we learned about the first 6 days of John's Gospel. All of these themes from Exodus and Genesis all show up back in John 1 and the beginning of John 2. It concludes with the Wedding at Cana story. In John chapter 12, we're going to see the beginning of a second 6-day sequence. Finally, in our last class, we saw how the different groups responded to Jesus' signs. There were divisions, especially after the third sign, the healing of the sick man in Jerusalem, the fourth and fifth signs, which were both in John chapter 6, and then the sixth sign, which was the healing of the man born blind. So given that, let's look at the seventh sign, the raising of Lazarus. We begin logically enough at the beginning of John 11. Now a man was ill, Lazarus from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. Mary was the one who had anointed the Lord with perfumed oil and dried his feet with her hair. It was her brother Lazarus who was ill. Mary anointed Jesus with perfumed oil? When did that happen? Correct answer, it hasn't happened yet in John's chronology. It's not going to happen until John chapter 12. This is an anachronism. We can draw two things from this. Number one is that John is not principally concerned with chronology. It's another evidence of that. We've seen that a few times in John's Gospel. Secondly, it points to the fact that likely the traditions about what Jesus had said and done were already circulating around in John's church. It's for the same reason that already in John chapter 2, the evangelist can tell us about the resurrection without ruining the suspense. There never was any suspense, so we can point that out. Anyhow, as we look at the entire story of the raising of Lazarus, it proceeds in 5 movements. You've got exposition. That's what we just saw, the opening 3 verses. We introduce Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. We learn about who they are. But we're going to see that for the first 16 verses, Jesus doesn't actually even show up on scene. He's away with the disciples, and he chooses to stay away. Indeed, look what we read here. The sisters sent word to Jesus saying, "Master, the one you love is ill." Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that he was ill, he remained for 2 days in the place where he was. Jesus knew, he loved, but he didn't do anything initially. Notice also on your screen you've got 2 different verbs for love in Greek. We'll see these again after the resurrection. Jesus doesn't arrive on scene until verse 17, and he speaks with Martha for 11 verses. And then he speaks with Mary and interlopers, whom John calls, in quotes, the Jews, for 10 verses. The miracle doesn't actually happen until the last 7 verses of the story. Let's look at a few key points. The disciples, when they're alone with Jesus, completely miss the point. So Jesus tells us from the beginning what the point is. He says that you may believe. Indeed, we know that's the whole point of the entire Gospel of John. Jesus is going to do the 7th sign so that the disciples may believe. Let's see if he succeeds. But first, Jesus arrives on scene, speaks to Martha. Martha complains, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give you." Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise." Martha said to him, "I know he will rise in the resurrection on the last day." What do you think of Martha's faith here? Clearly she knows something about who Jesus is. She has some faith, but she's not all the way there yet. She hasn't fully committed to the fact that Jesus knows what he's going to do and that it's for the best. Let's look at Jesus' response. Jesus told her, "I am the resurrection and the life." There's one of those ego eimi statements. "Whoever believes in me, even if he dies, will live, and everyone who lives and believes in me will never die." Do you believe this? She said to him, "Yes, Lord, I have come to believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one who is coming into the world." Now what do you think of Martha? She has come to believe. That expression, it's in the Greek perfect tense. We call this an intensive perfect. It emphasizes the present effects of an action that has been begun in the past and has been repeated and has been ongoing up until the present moment. John uses this expression a few times. I have come to believe. That's the journey of the disciple. Faith does not happen all at once. The effect of this gospel that John has written us does not get achieved all at one time. It's an ongoing process. It's something we have to ongoingly accept, something we have to ongoingly come to believe. Let's cut to the chase and go straight to the end of the story. Look what Jesus says. Did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? So they took away the stone. And Jesus raised his eyes and said, Father, I thank you for hearing me. I know that you always hear me, but because of the crowd here I have said this, that they may believe that you sent me. And when he had said this, he cried out in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. And so he did. Notice all of the highlighted words on this screen. We know that believe and the goal that the crowd will come to believe is essential to what's happening, and that they're going to see the glory of God. Notice this is the seventh sign. It recapitulates what happened in the first sign, the wedding at Cana, that the glory of God was first revealed. Here it comes to a height. Does it achieve its effect? Do the people believe that the Father sent him? Again, that the Father sent him. Remember, that's been an issue in all those controversies we saw in John 5, 6, 7, 8, up through 10. Let's see if it had its effect. Let's look at the response to this seventh sign. Now, many of the Jews who had come to Mary and had seen what he had done began to believe in him. But some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. And then we hear the Passover of the Jews was near, and many went up from the country to Jerusalem before Passover to purify themselves. Indeed, what results? Another schism. Some believe, but those who want to explain the sign away find a way to do so, and they want to kill Jesus. Indeed, this raising of Lazarus seals Jesus' fate. After raising Lazarus, Jesus withdrew north for a brief time. But we're ready now for the second 6-day sequence of John's Gospel, which we talked about at the beginning of the course. We already saw this slide at the very beginning. 6 days before Passover, Jesus came to Bethany where Lazarus was, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. And now and only now do we hear about the anointing of Jesus' feet. Indeed, all of chapter 12 describes the preparations that Jesus is making for Passover. So you can see on your chart here the outline for all of chapter 12. This describes preparations that Jesus is making for Passover. We have the anointing at Bethany that begins chapter 12, and it's a little different from the Synoptics, where this occurs much later, closer to the crucifixion. Verses 9 through 11 are awfully interesting because the narrator is going to intervene and clarify whom the plot opposes. The large crowd of the Jews found out that he was there and came not only because of Jesus, but also to see Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. And the chief priests plotted to kill Lazarus too, because many of the Jews were turning away and believing in Jesus because of him. So you can see the signs have only had so much of an effect. They've led some people to faith, but not everybody. Some of the witnesses want to destroy the evidence of Christ being sent by the Father. And if they're intent on doing so, that's exactly what they're going to do. So Jesus enters triumphantly into Jerusalem. The disciples don't understand, but in a re-echo of what we saw in the cleansing of the temple scene back in chapter 2, they begin to understand only after the resurrection. Then a famous scene occurs. The Greeks come to see Jesus. Only when these foreigners arrive is Jesus able to announce that his hour has come. And here's the most important part of the speech he gives. This is his final public speech before his passion. Now is the time of judgment on this world. Now the ruler of this world, here that means Satan, will be driven out. It's like an exorcism. And when I am lifted up from the earth, I will draw everyone to myself. He said this indicating the kind of death he would die. 4 verses later, Jesus hides, not to be seen again until his passion. We've seen how the characters have responded to the signs and the testimony. Now the question remains for us, just as it remained for John's community. How do we respond? In faith or by suppressing the evidence and doubt? In our next class, we'll look at the Book of Glory. Until then, read well and pray well.